Warning: do not watch this alone. What you're about to hear is not a myth. It's a real cult that killed in silence for hundreds of years. Some roads still remember them. For centuries, travelers across India vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no screams echoing through the night, no blood trails staining the earth. No witnesses left to tell the tale. Merchants, setting out with caravans loaded with goods, disappeared into thin air. Pilgrims on sacred journeys to distant temples never returned home. Entire families, men, women, and children, were erased from existence mid-journey, as if they had never been. Local authorities were baffled. They blamed common bandits, desperate for gold and jewels. They pointed to wild animals, predators lurking in the dense forests that lined the roads. Sometimes, they simply chalked it up to bad luck, a tragic but unexplainable consequence of life on the open road. But they were wrong. The truth was far more organized, far more patient, and infinitely more terrifying. Something ancient and methodical was at work, a hidden network operating just beneath the surface of society, preying on the unsuspecting. These disappearances weren't random acts of violence. They were calculated, ritualistic, and part of a system that had perfected the art of making people vanish. The roads were hungry, and the people responsible were hiding in plain sight, their secrets buried deep beneath the very paths their victims walked. The real story was not one of crime, but of faith. The name, when it was finally spoken, was whispered in fear. They were called the Thuggee. This wasn't a gang of criminals or a band of political rebels fighting against an empire. They were a cult, a secret society bound together by ancient rituals, a sacred vow of silence, and a covenant of blood. For a thug, killing wasn't a crime to be ashamed of. It was a holy duty, a divine calling. They didn't see themselves as murderers. In their eyes, they were priests, performing a sacred act ordained by a powerful, fearsome goddess. They believed their work was essential, a necessary function to maintain the cosmic order of the universe. To them, taking a life wasn't an act of malice, it was an act of worship. Turning the highways of India into their personal altars. This belief system allowed them to operate without remorse, without guilt, seeing each victim not as a person, but as an offering. The Thuggee worshipped Kali, the Hindu goddess of time, creation, destruction, and death. But their vision of Kali was different from the one worshipped in mainstream temples and public festivals. Their Kali was a primal force, one that craved balance in the world. According to Thuggee lore, in the beginning of time, Kali battled a great demon that could replicate itself from every drop of its own blood that touched the ground. To defeat it, Kali created two men and gave them pieces of her own clothing, instructing them to strangle the demons so that no blood would be spilled. From these two men, the Thuggee believed they were descended. Every murder they committed was a reenactment of this myth. They believed each life they took prevented a greater disaster, like a plague, a famine, or a war. Each traveler they strangled was a sacrifice to appease their goddess and keep the forces of chaos at bay. Each death, to them, was a grim necessity. They were not just killers. They were, in their own minds, the saviors of the world, one silent death at a time. Their method of operation was a masterpiece of deception. Their greatest weapon was trust. They joined traveling groups, presenting themselves as fellow merchants, soldiers, or pilgrims seeking safety in numbers. They walked beside you. They shared your fire at night, laughed at your jokes, listened to your stories, and ate from the same pot. They would offer protection from the very dangers they embodied. Sometimes, this charade would last for days. Other times, for weeks. They would patiently integrate themselves into the fabric of the traveling party, earning the complete trust of their soon-to-be victims. They were the friendly face in the crowd, the helpful hand on a difficult path. By the time they decided to act, their victims were completely at ease, surrounded by people they considered friends. The attack was never a battle, it was a betrayal. And when the moment was right, when the travelers were resting, perhaps singing songs under the stars, the thugs would give a secret signal. Often it was a phrase, like "bring the tobacco." Then they would strike. They didn't use knives or swords. The spilling of blood was considered a transgression, a failure in the ritual. Instead, they used a rummel, a consecrated silk or cloth sash, often weighted at one end. In a single, swift, coordinated movement, a thug would slip the rummel around the neck of their assigned victim from behind, while another accomplice would pull their legs, bringing them to the ground. Death came quietly, in a matter of moments. There were no screams, no prolonged struggles. The sacrifice had to be clean, efficient, and silent. The body was then ritually buried, often with a consecrated pickaxe, in a pre-dug grave. The road remained silent, as if nothing had ever happened. All possessions were taken as spoils, considered a gift from the goddess Kali for their service. By the early 1800s, a palpable fear gripped the roads of India. Entire regions were paralyzed by the terror of travel. Stories of disappearing caravans were common, but they remained just that, stories. When British officials finally realized the true scale of the horror unfolding across India, it was already far too late. The Thuggee weren't a small, isolated group. They were in the villages, disguised as farmers and merchants. They were on the trade routes, posing as friendly travelers. Most terrifyingly, they were even inside law enforcement, hidden in plain sight. The true death toll is a subject of chilling debate. Conservative estimates suggest tens of thousands of victims systematically strangled and buried. Other historians, looking at the sheer span of time and geography, argue the number could be well over 1 million people. We will never know the precise number. The ground itself holds the secret, a vast unmarked graveyard stretching across a subcontinent. The British Empire, shocked into action, launched one of the largest manhunts in history. A special department, the Thuggee and Dacoity Department, was created with a single, brutal purpose: extermination. The operation was massive and relentless. Interrogations were swift, executions were public, and mass arrests became commonplace. But what they discovered in the captured thugs was more disturbing than the violence itself. When members confessed, they did so calmly, without a trace of guilt or fear. They truly believed their goddess, Kali, would protect them, that this was their divine duty. Some even smiled as they described the grim details of the killings, recounting each strangulation as a sacred offering. They saw themselves not as murderers, but as priests performing a holy rite. Despite decades of this relentless hunt, despite all the arrests and executions, the authorities had to admit something terrifying. They never found all the graves. Countless victims remained lost, their bodies buried in secret pits along forgotten roads. They could never identify every single member of the cult. The organization was too vast, too deeply embedded in the fabric of society, and perhaps most unsettling of all, entire families. Families known to be associated with the Thuggee simply vanished from official records. They disappeared without a trace, as if they had never existed. Roads that were once busy arteries of trade were quietly abandoned, shunned by locals who knew what lay beneath the soil. Even today, long after the official end of the Thuggee, the whispers have not entirely faded. In rural parts of India, strange symbols are sometimes found carved into trees or stones near major highways, symbols eerily similar to those used by the cult. Older villagers still pass down the warnings of their grandparents, cautioning against traveling alone at night or accepting help from strangers on the road. Some refuse to even speak the cult's name aloud, believing it can invite bad fortune. Officially, the Thuggee are a closed chapter of history, a relic of a bygone era. But unofficially, in the quiet corners and whispered stories, no one is ever completely certain. Think about it, a cult that operated in secret for an estimated 600 years, passing its traditions from father to son, generation after generation, doesn't just disappear overnight. Deep-seated blood rituals don't end slowly. Beliefs that are woven into the very identity of a people don't die easily. And silence. Silence is the easiest thing of all to pass down. How many descendants of the Thuggee are alive today, carrying a secret history their ancestors swore to protect? The practice may have stopped, but does the belief remain, dormant, waiting? This wasn't just superstition. This was not a local legend or a ghost story to scare children. This was organized, ritualized mass murder on an industrial scale, hidden behind the veil of religious faith for centuries. And history itself admits one chilling fact very clearly. Despite the Empire's best efforts, they were never completely erased. Their roots ran too deep. Some roads are quiet for a reason. Some travelers simply never arrive at their destination. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark before it's too late.